I'm Jessica Wilson, and you're listening to Making It Awkward. Today we hear from Alison, another friend in my Food Friends group chat, about how she's been making things awkward in film and television recently. She co-founded a collective called Room Tone, which strives towards practical solutions that create equitable work experiences in the entertainment industry for people of all backgrounds. Room Tone's goal is to disrupt the traditional power structure of the entertainment industry by sharing knowledge, community support, and reputable resources. Alison will share lessons she's learned, barriers to the work, and a hot tip that helped with group engagement. We'll also hear about Room Tone's interest in the emerging role of intimacy coordinators. Now, for today's segment about food and nutrition, I'll share that the first few days into October, my concerns from the last episode were realized. Once I didn't have to keep track of what I was eating and plan for it to be 80% ultra-processed foods, I just wasn't eating as much food again. What helped me out was looking at my plate and thinking about whether or not I'd serve it to someone else, which, to be honest, is something that I've suggested hundreds of times for my clients with eating disorders. I think that I viewed myself differently because I don't have an eating disorder. Subconsciously, I may believe I don't have to pay as much attention to food and assume that I'll naturally be motivated to eat enough. And it turns out that just didn't happen. Apparently, feeding myself is another one of those adulting tasks of which I am not a fan. To turn this around before I needed to go back to naps in the afternoon, over-caffeinating, and always searching for snacks, it was also helpful for me to look at my plate and see if I'd post it to Instagram and call it a meal. I also took Amy's advice to make my food taste better, and it turns out that helped as well. And now, on to my conversation with Alison. Alison Pill has been consistently working in the film, TV, theater world for over 25 years, in some good things and some not so good things. They can't all be winners. She's mom to a radical child, person to Henry Chirpa the dog, and convinced she can raise hell with a well-worded email and a notebook. Her household proudly contains many toxic poisons, aka ultra-processed foods. She's also a founding member of Room Tone, a collective working to improve the film and television industry, and a former LA local board member of SAG-AFTRA. Here's the talk with Alison. Alison, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
Okay, to get started, let's talk about how we met. I'll tell you my version if you tell me yours.
Okay, let's hear it.
No, you have to go first.
Okay, sure, okay. I thought you meant you were going to start first, and then I was going to have a rebuttal.
This is going to be very fun. I want to, let's hear yours first.
Okay. It was summer 2020, right? Or spring? So. No, summer 2020. And I saw a post by my friend Anna that she had tagged me in, sort of highlighting your work, especially around eating disorders and whiteness. And I realized in the midst of so much thought and ink spill and like pointlessly flagellating people, posting black squares and everything else, that I had never really interrogated eating disorders in terms of whiteness. And so I reached out to Anna, who said that she was in contact with you and was going to be having like a second Zoom meeting with you. And would I like to join? And I was like, heck yeah. I mean, I just didn't know. Well, I like very straightforward parameters to a Zoom meeting. I like an agenda. Mm-hmm. I like goals. Mm-hmm. I like reasons. And I am also socially anxious. And so meeting people I don't know, whether on Zoom or anywhere else, can make me worried. And we met on this Zoom, and I did not know what to make of you or what was desired of me. You gave me some wonderful books to read, including Sabrina String's Fearing the Black Body.
Okay.
I did not know what the goal of our conversation was. It felt open-ended and unclear, and that was deeply uncomfortable. But I also liked the conversation and the points you were making, and I had no way to navigate these waters by myself in terms of looking at eating disorder treatment, eating disorders themselves, like looking at the sort of body politics of this nation and the world. And so I sort of, I don't know, kept coming back to you.
Indeed you did. Yeah, I remember when I met you. So Anna and I had like pretty chill, like conversations. And I got an email that was like, hey, my friend Allison wants to join. I'm like, I love chill people. Let's have Allison join. We'll continue to have like chill conversation. It'll be great. And Allison shows up with like her notepad and her pencil. And it's like, okay, I'm ready to go. And I was like, go where? Like, what are we doing? I was like, I think this conversation was like poorly advertised because Anna, was just like, we're just talking. And Allison is like, yes, what's the agenda? What are the goals? I am not prepared. And I was like, oh, this is going to be fun. And I can't remember if that was it the first time or the second time we all chatted that was like, let's do check-ins. How are you feeling?
I think that was I think we did check-ins on the second one, right?
Okay. Yeah. How'd that go?
I don't think it went great for me. I think I felt deeply uncomfortable. I think I probably said fine and then began to sob.
Yeah, I think you probably cried the first like 3 times that I had us all check in.
Mm-hmm. I don't love a check-in.
No, we definitely learned that. And we'll call back to that check-in in a while when we get into the work that you're doing. I was wondering, did we know we were going to be friends?
Like when we first met?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
No, I wouldn't say it was like, oh man, what a great hang, because I was showing up with my notebook and pen,
yeah,
and you were asking me about how I was feeling, and I was like, this person is a nightmare.
I don't have feelings. Why are you asking me about
I have a notepad?
Yes.
Yeah, so it was, deeply uncomfortable. And even, and for a while it was also, you were running this education group, so we weren't friends either. Like we sort of kept a professional distance.
Yeah.
For the first while in our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And then one of the things I learned was that relationships can change and morph. They are not set in stone. I had never experienced meeting someone, not knowing what the goal was, setting a different goal of sort of education, kind of coaching through, the thin white women problem of, so there's so many who can pick one. And then from there, sort of establishing one of the closest friendships in my life, which is really weird. I mean, it's not weird.
Let's use that in a clip. We're going to put that on social media, which is really weird. It's weird. Yeah. Thanks.
No, but just to start from a place where I didn't know what expectations to have, and even to have those sort of disrupted automatically.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually the very stringent procedures that perfectionism and my culture have taught me are the ways to go about the world are shockingly horrible like really bad ways of both building community or friendship or just walking around. Yeah.
Existing, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Yes, I definitely saw a drive within you to do something. I was like, Alison, let's get you support to capital D, do something, which was great. Like, you were totally the one that was prepared. It was amazing. I feel like you definitely showed up as your authentic self. And which was great. I was like, this is a person who was quirky. She's fun. I like Alison. Let's give Alison the tools so that she can step into her greatness, for sure.
And you did.
I did. So what are you working on now?
So with a great deal of help and guidance from you, I started looking at, by fall of 2020, like fall, winter 2020, I started thinking about anti-fat bias in the film and TV industry, which is rampant and horrifying, and wanted to gather together a group of sort of like-minded individuals who felt the same way. And I didn't know how to start a group, and I didn't know how to talk to people, and I didn't know what I wanted or what the goal would be or where my notebook and I could take off to.
Yeah.
And you were like, well, you should probably start talking to people. And I was like, but I don't know what I'm talking to them about. Like, I don't have a thing. Like, what am I inviting them to? And you're like, yeah. Remember that time that we met and we sat on a Zoom meeting? Like, you might not know. And I am not particularly adept at not knowing or having no expectations for the way something will go.
Yeah.
And I started cold calling people and sort of reaching out to people that I thought might be interested. And from there got to meet, I mean, the number of strangers that I spoke to by phone was astonishing to me. And just talking about inclusion in the industry, and ended up speaking to a wonderful costume designer who was working in her guild for greater equity across the board in many ways, but also looking at like the way people run their fitting rooms. And I got in touch with her because I'd heard really great reviews from all of these actors in her fitting room. And I was like, how do we make that happen for more people? Because the fitting room can be this very traumatizing environment for many different reasons for people in all different sizes of bodies, all different kinds of bodies. And then from there, this sort of like anti-fat bias discussion, we realized like, well, you can't talk just about that because the fitting rooms often may not be wheelchair accessible, and we haven't taken into account what it's, what it's like for trans performers to enter into these spaces. So suddenly this thing that seemed like, okay, maybe we have an idea to sort of write a pamphlet to talk about, weight bias in the fitting room. We actually have to make this a bigger thing because that's the only way it makes sense. And so the group got bigger and also strangely more focused, and the conversations got bigger, and we have voices from all these different communities. And that was sort of the beauty of doing what you had said, which was like, just start by calling people. And you don't have to have the answers ahead of time, like invite people into a thing. And then there was also, do you want to talk about the greatest advice you've ever given me?
Yes, I do. But before we get there, so engagement assessment, but also what we called it at the time was relationship building.
Yes.
And just building those relationships as like the foundation for this, rather than having like a transactional or like somehow like other sterile type of relationship, but letting people know, who you are, what you're about, your regular real person.
And getting to hear their stories too.
Yeah. So the things that you learned came from a specific assessment.
Yes. So this is a gross generalization, but trans people fucking love a Google poll. This is just what we learned. This is what we learned. The vast majority of the SAG-AFTRA membership will not open an email, but within the trans performer community that our friend is tapped into, the wonderful friend Morgan Sullivan just put up a poll about just a Google poll on his Instagram, and we got great results from all of these trans performers about their experiences in the fitting room, and sort of different ways, like different, the results from the cis community were less. We just had fewer responses. I was like, come on, cis people, write a freaking poll response. But we got we got really helpful feedback, and ended up having different shapewear discussions than we expected. For instance, where it's like me and many others coming from this place of like, don't force our bodies into shapewear. And then realizing that like shapewear makes people feel a lot of different ways for a lot of different reasons. And just how all these discussions of the shape of body, like everybody's individual experiences kind of coming together and slowly but surely coloring in the sort of outlines of what we imagine the fitting room experience could be. The name of our collective is Room Tone, which comes from, so when you are on a set and you are relatively sure that the dialogue you've recorded will not be usable, after the scene is finished shooting, everybody on set has to stop for a second. And they have to record the sound of the room with everybody in it, but nobody moving or talking. And so like there's this huge pull to everybody wants to get equipment out of the way. We got to move on to the next scene. And there's also, most of the time I have to stifle laughter just because I think it is incredibly funny, in the way that, I don't know, many inappropriate things I find funny. And just the fact that laughter would be inappropriate in this moment. But yes, so your boom operator is standing there. You're rolling sound on the silence of a room, which is not actually silence, and all the bodies that have been in this room so that you can later mix in whatever dialogue you need to add. But the beauty of this sort of stop, pause, we need to record this room with nobody talking in it and everybody here. We also had a Google poll on our name, to be fair. Ooh. Our membership has gotten pretty good at a Google poll, thanks to Morgan bringing that to our attention.
Yes. Which leads into the engagement portion. So at the beginning, you were like, people come, they leave, they don't always come back. What do I do?
Yeah. And Jessica brought up sending people something because of the showing your own skin in the game. So what I ended up doing, this wonderful artist, Maybelle Equay, who has a wonderful non-binary frog named Little Frog, who often is dressed in fantastic outfits, who I adore. I sent everybody mugs. I got their mailing addresses. I hounded everyone down to make sure that they got me their mailing addresses. And I packed up all these little mugs and sent them around the country with Little Frog, and they all say, "You're doing great," to solidify the idea that I would keep turning up, and that hopefully when people saw this mug, they would return to not just the work and the Google polls and the meetings, but the actual community and the relationships that we had built, which, as Jessica pointed out very astutely, was actually what was going to make people keep coming back. And that the balance between the work and the projects or whatever would have to be balanced with, god-awful check-ins. Good news is when you're running a meeting, you don't have to check in as hard.
Fair. You can deflect to everyone else.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember the first time I got like a rundown of a meeting, and then you got to the end, you're like, but wait, I forgot. I did a check-in, and you were like, I guess it was good. It's fine. It's good.
Yeah.
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 That was a big day. Very big day.
Yeah.
What barriers have you found for room tone, and what do you think is next?
The barriers are the same as, and we've talked about this a lot within the group itself. Just, and it's any activism anywhere of the sort of push pull between kind of reforming an existing system, pushing it certain directions from the outside, kind of needing some help from the inside, bureaucracy, even though it can be frustrating. So when we were putting out this fitting room pamphlet, we went back and forth with the Costume Designers Guild, got the Costumers Guild to sign on, and in terms of performers, we were working with SAG-AFTRA, and the number of times, the number of back and forth, the layer of staff, the layer of lawyers, just to achieve the sign-off that we needed. We constantly questioned whether it was worth it. And then really just coming back to, well, there's 160,000 SAG-AFTRA members. Like, there's a lot. So would the stamp, does the stamp from the kind of senior organization make up for this time? And we found that it did. We went back and forth a lot. And I think that's a constant discussion in these things of when you're trying to look for legislative change, or, I can see it even within our union on the subject of like hair and makeup equity for our performers, where like working within the union, activists within the boards themselves and within the union, also legislatively working on the Crown Act which prevents workplace discrimination based on hair. So it's like that passes in California. Now we have to pass it federally. All of these things that are like, even within these larger structures, there's always a bigger structure to be going for and trying to push in a certain direction, which can be overwhelming at times when you're just like, I don't know what to do. And this is why I also think like having a small collective that allows us to talk these things out is incredibly helpful. Like having the personal relationship that is not possible within a membership, a state, a country. Mm-hmm. So yeah, first barrier was really just like bureaucracy and time. And then there's the sort of what we want to work on next. We have interest in looking at the world of intimacy coordinators, which is a new field that, if it works out the way it's imagined, would be the exact same as having a stunt coordinator on set if there's a big stunt. So if there's an intimate scene involving nudity or not, be it a kiss or a hug or whatever, some physical touching, because we have a stunt coordinator on set if somebody is falling off a chair. And
interesting.
Yeah, like literally, I mean, like this is you can get hurt, and so there's reasons why we have these things in place to prevent harm on set. We have not had those same harm prevention measures in place for anything involving nudity or intimate moments. And currently, the system is still being figured out. As it's being figured out, it's sort of it's an exciting time. We just want to be sure that as it's being figured out, the needs of performers with disabilities, the needs of trans performers, the needs of fat performers, like all of these things are looked at with the same care as across the board, and with specific needs in mind, and that we get those in front of people who are currently being trained in systems that we don't really, the accreditation sort of is still being developed. So yeah, there's a lot of ways to prevent harm. And then there's just a ton of ways where we're like, how do we make this industry better? Because like all industries, it's exploitative. It's really white in so many, many ways. There's been improvements in some areas, and yet the overall culture has not shifted as much as I'd like to see it shift.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it feels like banging our heads against a wall. But then we also get to be on a group text talking about, how everybody's doing, which makes it worthwhile. So yeah, there's huge barriers because nobody wants to change anything.
Sure. I mean, including you at the beginning, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I am hearing confidently that it was worth it to you to both be awkward and make it awkward.
It was very worth it.
Yeah.
Very,
And
very worth it.
do you have any tips or tools for other folks out there who might be like, I don't know what I hear what they're saying. It sounds interesting, but I'm not convinced.
I was so intent on never making it awkward for anyone, and had sort of denied the moments when I'd been making it incredibly awkward for a number of people and myself through this cognitive dissonance that was required of me being like, don't worry, I'm not making it awkward. I was making it so awkward with things unsaid, with behaviors, like all of these things were not necessarily mine, were not necessarily my values, and were unexamined. But there is an awkwardness to the cognitive dissonance required to be like, it would be more awkward for me to say something. A lot of the time, somebody will hear you making it awkward and go, oh my gosh, thank you. This makes it so much less awkward for me.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the piece that I needed to see in action, I think, before I fully believed it.
Mm.
Of bringing things up on set that I never would have before. Partly because I know that I can be on a group chat to friends of mine with similar values in a heartbeat, or you, or any number of people. Be like, can you believe this shit? But beyond that, when I bring these things up on set, I am not met with like, oh, side eye sort of cringe. Most of the time, I'm met with people like, oh, just this huge sigh of relief.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm saying the awkward thing that we've all been dancing around, be it,
Right.
The hair and makeup trailer that does not, take care of this many performers in this cast, to be talking about the way fitting rooms feel for me in this horrible way that opens it up to other people being able to talk about their experiences, to talk to producers about the need for turnaround, or to look at background performers and make sure everybody's chill, and like that these are not dancing around pretending I'm not making it awkward actually was making me feel incredibly bad, and others live in their own heads as just like me. And now it is so much less awkward.
With practice. I think you've done a great job. You're super chill about awkwardness now.
I mean, let's not go crazy, Jessica. Not like the most chill. It still gives me like hives, but it's gotten.
Let's clarify for anybody worried. Do you actually get hives, Alison?
No.
Okay.
I don't actually get hives.
Okay.
I've only gotten I've only gotten sort of psychosomatic hives once.
That's great. I was thinking back to, I was like, when and how did we become friends? And I think it was like at the point where like you were doing great. And like, I didn't have experience with anything like leveling up that you were doing. Like I had done the, relationship building engagement piece. And then you were just like off and running. And then I was just like hearing about all the great stuff. And I was like, I don't know. Like our friend Shayna does like organizational stuff. And I was like, maybe, she would be one to know. And so then after that, it just became like updates and live stuff. And then it was like, I think I like this person. She's quirky, like me. I see where her brain works. There's a lot of things unsaid, but I know what they are.
Yeah, and I've started getting better at saying the things that used to go unsaid. Somewhat.
Oh, I think so.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and if we're on video, you see my face. Because then yeah. And the eyebrow goes up and I'm like,
Yeah. I also stopped crying at the vast majority of check-ins.
Yeah.
I mean, in meetings and with, like, don't just burst into random tears all the time.
No, not at all. Emotional maturity, growth.
That's what comes with making it awkward.
I think being able, and I regularly say, like, sitting in that discomfort and like, then you're not going to die the next time. So yeah, you do it one time, you think you're going to die, you kind of do. And then the second time you still do it again. You're like, I died, but less. And then after that, you're like, I know what to do, this feeling. It's very uncomfortable. But then, yeah, like exactly what you said. You have the group chat, you have the community, you have the relationships. So yeah, you're totally doing it. Killing it for sure. But I appreciate you. I think what you're doing is super amazing. And I've already seen the conversations that you've highlighted, your support and promotion of the conversation about Black women's hair with Tiffany Cox and Michelle Hurd about the barriers that they've had. I thought that was a fascinating conversation. So yeah, I feel like you're in it and in it to win it and doing great things. So congratulations.
Thank you. And congratulations to you on finishing your book and starting this podcast that I've been hearing about. And here it is.
Here it is. I know, as Molly would say, I've been ideating about it for years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, doing it on my own versus like needing somebody else to do a podcast with me to feel like, it would actually be a good podcast if it was with somebody else and not just by myself. So thank you. Thanks for that. And
that was a huge piece of growth for you. To be like, it's going to be the things I want to talk about and my work. And actually, I don't need anything else because that is enough. That is more than enough. As we've seen in these first, I don't know, double hands of episodes.
Double hands, however many.
Well, I was like 2 handfuls of episodes.
Maybe, yeah.
There is so much to say, and I think you are the one to say it. I don't know anybody else who's talking about so much of this in the way that you do with the kind of guidance, respect, and basis in care that you have for everybody that, that sort of drives this whole body of work of yours.
That's so sweet. I appreciate that. With that, I will wrap up by saying thank you again for coming on the show. I look forward to having you back. I want to hear more from Room Tone. You and I have way more awkward things to talk about on the podcast as well. Yeah, we'll have to come up with somebody to interview together for sure.
Let's have Nicole Byers on.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll just ask that, I'll call her. I'll build that relationship. Yeah. I'll send her a mug.
Great.
We'll have her on. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll both send her. If we both send her mugs, she'll definitely come. That's really cool.
That's how it works. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sure. Okay. We'll work on that. All right. Thank you so much, friend. I really appreciate you.
Appreciate you.
Thanks again to Alison for being on the show. Next week, we'll hear from a journalist about what gets to be news. And today, Alison wraps up the show.
The best way to support this podcast is to rate it, review it. Just tell 3 friends tell 4 friends. You know what? Tell 5 friends about this show. Subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Make it awkward, babies. I almost had it.
I'm leaving that laughing. Okay,
I know you are, but I could have been cool.
I'm Jessica Wilson, and this has been an episode of Making It Awkward. Making It Awkward is sponsored by my book, It's Always Been Ours. It's a production of The Body Politic and is edited and mixed by the amazing Jen Jacobs.